Good evening to all of you. Namaskar. I welcome all of you to Amit Sin IAS Academy, and this is going to be another session on the question answer discussion of history optional paper. So, as you may have seen in my last video that has already been posted on my YouTube channel, in the last video I discussed about the 2019 history optional paper, and when I began that paper I told you very clearly that in different sessions we would be conducting the discussion over the last few years of question papers of history optional. Now, having said that, let me tell you one more thing, that as far as history optional paper is concerned, these days the questions have become quite typical in terms of asking you the exact questions on that. And if you see the paper of last couple of years, the questions were so typical that it was ordinarily not possible for many of the students to write all those questions. Now, it is fortunately that of course you are asked to write only few of those questions. In fact, you've been given the option to select either 3 or 2 from either of the 2 sections, either from, let's say, ancient or medieval India. Therefore, you are saved it that way. Therefore, you need to understand that whatever question that you attempt, you will have to attempt with sure certainty, and you should have the idea about those questions in totality, in fact. Having said that, of course, we discussed it yesterday in the context of the ancient India questions of 2019 history optional paper. Today, I am starting with another set of questions of medieval India, and then I'll also share with all of you the sources for medieval India, from where the questions are being asked for all of you. So let us just discuss those questions now one by one. Let me first of all also introduce to all of you that I am starting the history optional classes from 22nd of October. You can see on the screen. From 22nd of October, I am starting these all classes, in fact, and this class is going to be of 3.5 months period, in which I will be covering about the entire segments of history optional paper. Classes will begin from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. That's actually the class timing. So that is what actually was the idea, and of course on 22nd of October, I would like that those who are interested and those who actually have taken history as an optional paper, they must join these classes. Alright, so this classes is going to be really very interesting one for many of you, in fact, because in this class I will be using both the digital screen along with the PPT. Alright, so you will be also having the access of PPT that actually have been made by me. Fine, so this is how we are going to conduct the classes, along with the entire support would be there in the class, right? Like how to write an answer, then the history optional paper. And let me tell you, history has been one of those subjects of mine in my all the mains examination, which has never let me down. Rather, I would say history has been the only option in my entire duration of my preparation, which has always given me the invitation to go for the interview in UPSC. Alright, that's what actually you can understand the importance of history for me. So that is how history has been there in my life, right? So having said that, as I just told you, that in this class we will be having the regular discussions on question answers, and also I will be ensuring that all of you along with the class must learn also how to write good answer there in the history optional paper. Fine. So that is the advantage, obviously, to join the history optional with me. So that's what actually you will be realizing this sort of importance of history, and also the way I teach history once you will attend the classes only. Before that, what is to be said on that? Listen, you don't have experience with me, how can I, boost myself? So that's the point. But nevertheless, it's very popular statement of E.H. Carr that you must know about your historian before you start studying the facts of history. That is the importance of understanding history. So having said that, let me now introduce with all of you the question paper of last year. So see, the last year question paper was in 2019, I'm asking to all of you. 2019, the question paper was asked, and in which I've already discussed about the ancient India. Now, this session is going to be on medieval India questions of 2019 UPSC history main optional examination. Fine. So let us discuss now. Now you can see on your screen itself. That is the discuss. The first question is on the issue of discuss how Vijayanagar Empire became the cultural capital of the South. That is the very first question that was asked last year. Now see, first of all, you need to understand a few of the things from this particular Vijayanagar Empire question, and out of those things, of course, you can see on your screen. Out of those things, you need to understand about the idea of that what this question is demanding from you. So primarily speaking, this question is demanding from you some idea regarding the Vijayanagar Empire, how it became the cultural capital of the South. Now Vijayanagar Empire, cultural capital of the South. So point is that you need to know what is the time frame of the Vijayanagar Empire. So if you have a fair idea about the time frame of Vijayanagar Empire, then you can simply understand this empire, which was from the early 14th century, it was formed. Fine, it continued till the mid of 16th century. So therefore, almost there is a period of almost 200 years that are associated with Vijayanagar Empire. And this 200 years, many of the dynasties, they came into the existence of Vijayanagar Empire, right from the Sangam dynasty to Saluba dynasty, to Tuluv dynasty, to the Aravidu dynasty. Now see, I mean, these all dynasties actually ruled in the Vijayanagar Empire, and of course the most important ruler that you also know from Tuluv dynasty, he was Krishna Deva Raya. So definitely, I mean, the idea is that under the Krishna Deva Raya, that was a period between 1509 to 1530 CE. Now this was the period of Krishna Deva Raya in which Vijayanagar Empire was at its zenith. It was at its zenith. That was the rule of Krishna Deva Raya. Now that is not the concern about here. The concern is about understanding the cultural capital of the South. So see, I mean, in this period, Vijayanagar became the cultural capital of the South because of various factors. So what you have to explain here, you have to explain here the contribution of Vijayanagar Empire towards the cultural aspects, and that will start from let's say the idea of literature. Alright, so literature, the foreign scholars, their visitors, and their visits in Vijayanagar Empire, and the observation about the cultural festival of Vijayanagar Empire. So that's what actually we have to also explain here. Then of course we have to also explain about the contribution in architecture, that how the Providya style of architecture got developed under the Vijayanagar Empire. Alright, then you have to also explain about not only architecture but also the kind of, you can say, the social life that was there in the Vijayanagar Empire. For example, there was existence of Vipra Vinodin. Now Vipra Vinodin was a group of 15 caste who belonged to the art and craft. So you can understand that is highly developed group in the Vijayanagar Empire, that is Vipra Vinodin. So of course you have to understand, you have to explain about these all aspects, the literature, the contribution of foreign scholars, the architecture, of course the social life over there in Vijayanagar Empire. Fine. So these all things we'll have to explain, and while explaining that, of course we have to cite certain examples like Hampi, alright, so Vithala temple. So these are the examples which are also there in the NCERT. So these temples examples you have to cite in terms of the how this Vijayanagar Empire had become a cultural capital at that particular point of time. Fine. So this is what we have to explain about the contribution of Vijayanagar Empire in this particular factor. That is what precisely was the idea about this particular question. And since it has to be written in 150 words only, so I think if you have 5-6 points in your hand, in your mind, you can explain at least 10 words on each, and that will be sufficient. That will be sufficient for writing an answer in 150 words only. That is the point. So here, since there is no scope of giving the background and giving the also the consequences, etc. Because 150 words is a word limit. Therefore, you should stick with the particular factor only, that how Vijayanagara Empire became the cultural capital of the south. In this particular order only, it became a cultural capital of the south. And of course, the major contribution of cultural capital in the south was in the context of the political stability in the Vijayanagara Empire. And under the rulers like Krishna Devaraya, or Devaraya first, Devaraya II, of course, these are very remarkable rulers of the Vijayanagara Empire. And because of their rule only, it attained the highest stage of cultural capital, and that's the reason why it was also another example of cultural harmony at that particular point of time in entire South India. Fine, you can understand even the language like Sanskrit, Telugu, of course Tamil, all those languages also got huge promotion under the Vijayanagara Empire. That is the precise idea about the cultural capital of the south in the form of Vijayanagara Empire. Fine. Then you have the next question, that is examine the status of Sanskrit in the Mughal India. Now see, this is another very typical question. Why typical question? I mean, of course, you don't find the information about this issue in Mughal India in any ordinary book. But having said that, it does not mean that we do not have a source for this particular question. The very important source for this question is, of course, the Wonder That Was India, written by S.A.A. Rizvi. So it's a very important book, especially when you understand, when you study about the cultural aspect of the medieval India. So the Wonder That Was India has explained about the status of Sanskrit in Mughal India, and most important issue is Varanasi was the most important center of Sanskrit in the Mughal period also. Fine. So that is the story of Sanskrit in the Mughal period. And at the same time, of course, there were many scholars that actually got the promotion in the Mughal period also, who were writing the books and other scripts in Sanskrit at that particular point of time. So not only Sanskrit but other languages also got a promotion at that particular point of time during the Mughal period, and that is precisely the idea that you have to explain about the role of Sanskrit. So Sanskrit was primarily spoken there in the regions like, of course, in the UP, that is Varanasi and nearby areas, fine. And at the same time, even in South India, Sanskrit was still language which was being promoted at that particular point of time. I mean, I just told you that even during the time of, let's say, the Mughals who were ruling in the North India, in the South India, of course, this empire like Vijayanagar, they were still promoting Sanskrit in their own region. Alright, and you need to understand that the largest number of inscriptions found in Vijayanagar Empire was written in Sanskrit only. So this is how studies of Sanskrit has to be examined, has to be explained in the context of Mughal India, and this is nicely given there also in your S.A.A. Rizvi book of A.L. Bharshan, The Wonder That Was India, Part 2. Fine. Part 1 was written by A.L. Bharshan and Part 2 is written by S.A.A. Rizvi. Fine. That's the point. Then you have to also explain about the next question, that is rule of General Abidin in Kashmir. Now see, is also called as the Akbar of Kashmir. So Janul Abedin. Now why Janul Abedin rule is important? Because of course by 1339 the Samsuddin Mir, or the Samsuddin dynasty or Mir dynasty started taking, or rather took place in entire Kashmir. So Kashmir witnessed the entry of, you can say, the Muslim rulers only from the middle of the 14th century period. Fine. And before that, Kashmir was being ruled by the Hindu kingdoms, and of course it has been nicely explained also in the Kalhan's Raj Tarangani. Fine. So Raj Tarangani has been written by various scholars. Fine. So of course Kalhan's Raj Tarangani has also been there to support this idea that of course before the 14th century, Kashmir was being ruled by many of the Hindu kings and the kingdoms. Now that's what actually was one of the part of the story of Kashmir. But the point is that when Samsuddin Mir came into power, of course he adopted many of those policies which were anti-Hindu. Of course he enforced the role of Shariat. He enforced the many of the you can say the Islamic practices there in Kashmir, or rather he also forced many of the Kashmiris to convert into Islam or convert to Muslim religion. That's what actually was also the role of the Sahabuddin, the Samsuddin's son, alright, the successor, they in of course Kashmir. So his rule was of high tyranny, and that's the reason why when General Abedin he came into power, he tried to provide a sort of a rapprochement between the two cultures, that is Hindu and Muslim in Kashmir, and that's the reason why he is also known as the Akbar of Kashmir. So in his domain, in his policy, he allowed the Hindus to profess his religion, their religion. He allowed even the Brahminical scholars, or Brahminical, you can say, Pandits, to be a part of the system of the Kashmir administration. He also allowed the marriages to be done in the among the Hindus, or on the Hindu practices, Hindu rituals only. So these all things were allowed by him, and then he also was there to support the construction of many of the temples there in Kashmir. So because of that particular factor only, General Abidin, being Islamic, you can say, supporter, or Islamic, you can say, king, still he supported the Hindu practices there in Kashmir, and because of that only, he is also known as Butsa, or the Akbar of Kashmir. So that's what actually you have to assess the role of General Abidin in Kashmir in that way. Fine. But after his demise, again Kashmir went back to the hardcore Islamic, you can say, state at that particular point of time. Then you have next question that is very interesting one, that is economic measures of Alauddin Khilji. So economic measures of Alauddin Khilji has been asked as a question. Now see, economic measures of Alauddin Khilji were aimed at greater political control. Discuss. So the point is, he introduced many reforms in economy, especially the market reform was very important, and then he also introduced the agriculture reform. So market and agriculture reform were the two major reforms of Alauddin Khilji, and this what actually was done to attain greater political control. Now why? Let us understand that also very clearly on this screen. See, what Alauddin Khilji did. Alauddin Khilji's era is known for many sort of disturbances, that is internal and external disturbances. Now the internal disturbances was of course the internal revolts against Alauddin Khilji's rule, and external was mainly of the Mongols' invasion. So he had to face these two particular challenges in his empire. Now to face these challenges, he needed economic resource or control. Alright. So he needed economic resource and control, and what was supposed to be done? This economic resource and control could have been only ensured if he has the control over the taxation there in the entire Sultanate era, Sultanate, you can say, territory. So economic resources reform were introduced in the context of the market reform. So first of all, he introduced the market reform, and second, he also introduced the agriculture reform. Now the point is, why did he introduce the market reform? Market reform was introduced because he had to hire a big army. A big army was his brainchild, and he wanted to enact the, you can say, the successes of course, Alexander. That's what actually he also took a title of Sikandar Sani. Fine. So he wanted to have a big army, and for big army he needed huge money. Huge money, along with even the price of the commodities should be, price of essential commodities should be controlled, should not be inflated, because if this is controlled, then he has to pay very minimum salary to the, of course, to the forces, to the army personnel. So because of this only, he needed the control over the market, and that's what actually he also introduced the system in the in his entire territory. Fine, that's what actually he did. Secondly, agriculture reform was also essential because he needed to collect revenue as much as possible. That's what actually what he did. 50% of taxation was collected from the land, and that is what was allowed as per the of course the Islamic law also. So under the Islamic law, the Shariat law allowed maximum revenue to be charged from the peasants by the state or by the ruler was 50%. So he actually imposed 50% of taxes to be charged from the agrarian, of course the agriculturist at that particular point of time, and this is how he used to get more and more money in his account. Fine, that's what actually he did. He also introduced some various taxes like Ghari, Charai, etc. Alright, so these taxes were also there to impose more and more money, or to collect more and more money, and at the same time he also introduced a sort of a control over the Khut Mukaddams and Chaudhries. Khut Mukaddams and Chaudhries. Now Khut Mukaddams and Chaudhries were local feudal lords. Now they could be a threat for the rule of Alauddin Khilji, therefore they also had to be controlled, and therefore it was kept mandatory, the Khari and Charai taxes to be paid by all these entities also. So see, I mean, through one tool he was trying to control many of the problems. Let's say the internal problem, like the internal revolt from Khud Muqaddam Chaudhary, could be easily controlled. Alright, because Ranas or other Chaudharys were the local traditional Jamindars in India, so they had to be controlled. And as far as Mongol invasion was concerned, it could be only controlled by maintaining a big army. And for that, he needed to control the salary and also the price of commodities in the market. So he appointed the officers like Suhna, Sehna also to look after the Sehna and Suhna officers were there to look after the market control in his racing. So with this, of course, with this reform, what was his agenda? Agenda was to establish a strong political setup in Sultanate period. And with a strong political setup, he was now there to expand the entire Sultanate area, because his era is known as the era of expansionism. Whereas the ruler of Sultanate period before Alauddin Khilji, of course, in the slave dynasty, in the Ilbari Turks dynasty, of course, they were mainly concerned about consolidation, not only of expansion. But he was concerned also of expansion only because of the political stability in Delhi Sultanate. That's what actually was the point that you were supposed to explain in this particular question. Fine. So this is what was the issue in this question. So it was aimed at greater political control like this way. Fine. Then you have impact of, examine the European impact on the Mughal painting. Another interesting question, because we all know that European painting was introduced for the first time under the court of Akbar. Alright. So Montserrat was the Portuguese who actually came to the court of Akbar, and he only introduced this so-called Mughal European painting for the first time. But it was Jahangir. Now it was Jahangir's era who was fond of painting. In fact, Jahangir was fond of painting, and in Jahangir era only the European painting has a huge impact upon the Mughal paintings only. So miniature painting was a typical feature of Jahangir era, and under his era only, the Europeans were also having a huge presence in the Mughal court in terms of contributing in the field of painting. So in the Jahangir era, they introduced also the portrait painting. Alright, even the European, you can say, themes were also used for the first time to give a sort of a dignified look to the emperor. Alright, and this is how they started using halo, watches, globe, etc. So these all started coming as a feature of painting in the Mughal court. So this is how European impact on Mughal painting was seen in the era of Jahangir.